Jake with Bond Performance. Just a quick video. I'm not really going to do a how-to. Just throwing the Bilstein coilovers I bought for the Suburban on today. Got an appointment for an alignment, so I'm just going to knock it out. These are pretty straightforward compared to some of the European vehicles I work on. It's actually already leveled, so this won't be a different ride height than before. We're just going about it a different way, and I'll show you that in a second. All right, so just kind of a quick before and after. Right now, the truck is leveled with spacers up front. As you can see, the suspension's kind of corroded. Looks like it's been on here a while. I've owned it since 117,000 miles, and it's got 161 on it now. We are in the south, so you'd be looking at way worse corrosion up north, but it's also got spacers in the rear. These, however, are the stock length shocks in the rear. The Bilsteins I ordered are longer to accommodate that extra bit of lift. So let's pull this off and see just how worn out these dampeners are. All right, so here's a side-by-side of what's coming off and what's going on. For those who are curious, here's the part number. These are B8 1612s. The reason I went with these coilovers is this is kind of a middle of the road upgrade, where just adding a coil spacer like I did here originally is what I'd consider a budget upgrade. This is kind of splitting the difference between going with an actual 2.5 inch coilover from a real coilover, well, I shouldn't say real, a higher end, more bespoke shock company like King. These are around 800 bucks for the pair for the front, but you're going from a 2-inch shock body to a 2.5, so this actually has a 63 millimeter piston in it. My only gripe to Bilstein is that they put flats on this on the shock stem, and on the Bilsteins on my car and a lot of other aftermarket coilovers and shocks, they'll do an Allen key, so you can insert the Allen and properly torque this with a spark plug socket. But there's really no way to properly torque this to 19 foot-pounds like they ask you to. I had to employ both sets of my spring compressors because this is a very heavy spring. And another cool feature about these, and the reason why I'm able to get away from this strut spacer, is these coilovers have 4 adjustment points. I can show you on the one that isn't assembled yet. There's a circlip that you simply just spread out and set it to your desired ride height, and they give you a list somewhere in here of which rings equal which height. So I'm at the 4th setting, which is 1.85 inch, and you can go all the way down to standard ride height if you don't want to lift the front of the vehicle at all. So I'm really looking forward to the ride quality improvement. I'm going to take this strut assembly apart just to check the condition of the strut. I'm assuming it's blown, but also to pull these spacers off, because being in the south, everybody likes their Z71s lifted and leveled, or unfortunately some of them do the lean, so I'm sure I'll be able to sell those, recoup a little bit of the investment I've made here. Got that one on the vehicle. So yeah, let me throw this in. I will also note that they do supply new lock nuts to replace the factory nuts that would be kind of integrated. Mine were pretty rusty. You do reuse these factory bolts though, so if you got a tap and die set, it's a good idea to clean them up or replace them, especially if you've got some corrosion. So I'm gonna keep going on this. Yeah. All right, so just to catch you up, the first one I assembled, overlooked swapping bump stops, so that one's been disassembled and reassembled again. Another thing to note is the tops of these mounts are not symmetrical, So make sure that you got the dimples and everything lined up. So what would be the top edge here is the inboard edge mounted in the truck. So here's one of the stock struts. A good healthy strut is smooth in its action, doesn't make groaning sounds like that, and once it's compressed it should plop right out and take about 2 seconds to fully deploy. So as you can see, this thing's just lumbering along. So these have been beat to death by the springs. No surprise, since this truck has 161,000 miles on it, assuming those are original. So I'm just going to keep going with this. Another thing to note, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, I'd use all 4 of my spring compressors to get the new springs installed. So there are some companies that will supply these already pre-assembled if you don't have a couple sets of spring compressors, or if you're afraid of them, because these are pretty inherently dangerous. That's an option for you, as well as taking just the loose suspension components to a local shop if you got another vehicle to drive to facilitate that. So just keep that in mind so you don't get yourself stuck mid-project without a way to get where you need to go. I'm actually kind of at risk of that because the Cummins project is all tore apart still. My GTI is on temporary wheels that don't really fit it to go get those tires mounted and these wheels powder coated. Hopefully that's a whole nother set of issues, but I'm gonna keep going on this. This is in here but not final torqued. I'm gonna wait until it's up in the air to torque the bottoms, a little bit easier to get at, and torque all 6 tops at the same time as well. So I'll add those torque specs in right here in this part of the video. Across the screen, I don't have them yet. Got to look them up, and I'll save you guys that step. All right, so moving on to the rears. These things are definitely blown, feel like crap. No consistency there. So yeah, this is gonna make a huge difference in how it rides. And once it hits full extension, you'll see the Bilsteins going on the rear are about 1 inch longer. So that'll help accommodate the leveling kit that's on the truck and not limit the down travel there or droop. All right, just a real quick wrap up on this. The fender liner does need to come out on the driver's side and at least come loose on the passenger side, as the hardware is a bit buried in there at the top. As I promised before, I'll put the torque specs in here. I'll lay it over the screen if I remember, but if not, the front upper and lower nuts get torqued to 37 foot-pounds, and the rear upper and lower shock mounts get torqued to 59 foot-pounds. So yeah, I'm excited to feel the improved ride quality. You may have noticed earlier in the video that I didn't put the dust boots back on. That's just a personal preference of mine up front. I'd rather be able to get in there and clean dirt than just kind of contain it with the factory boots. So I opted to leave those off. Plus aesthetically, I think it looks a lot cooler. And they were already factory installed boots on the rear, so I'll leave them on there until they start looking ratty, and then cut those off later down the line to be able to clean those seals off at where the chrome meets the actual dampener itself. So yeah, let me get this thing back on the ground and wrap this up, show you guys how it looks. I will note that you do want to put load back on the suspension when you torque these. I'm doing that with these jacks, keeping the vehicle from tipping with the front one. Obviously, you can do this in your driveway on jack stands with the floor jack, as long as you know how to do so safely. Definitely don't need the 2-post lift. I'm just at the point in my life where I was able to to build a shop, but I will be the first to say it hasn't always been this way. I've done a lot of work on vehicles in the driveway, in the rain, out of town. So don't feel intimidated that you don't have a lift to work on. You know, this is my biggest hobby. This is my business. So, well, side business, I should say. So, yeah, don't let not having a lift deter you. Again, this isn't a full-fledged DIY. This is just kind of an overview and more so a review of this suspension option, which actually Bilstein doesn't list for the Suburban. This is a part number for a Tahoe, but if you cross-reference OEM parts, they're the same. So I don't know why they chose to left that out, but yeah, bolts right up. So let me wrap this up. Hit the subscribe button if you're still watching up to this point. I've got lots of content on the Suburban, as well as quite a bit of fabrication stuff as well. So yeah, let's wrap this thing up. All right, so just to wrap up the video I shot a while back of the Suburban suspension install, those Bilstein 6112s. Now that I've got some miles on the truck, I've driven that Suburban probably 500 miles since installation, taken a few pictures of it back on its feet once everything's settled and the alignment was done. So just my feedback on it is it's worth every penny. If that suspension setup is something that's in your budget or that you can swing, I'd highly recommend it. It completely transformed the truck. On-road manners, turn-in, and anti-roll stability are night and day better. The biggest improvement I could imagine in that thing. It handles nice and tight. It doesn't body roll like a barge anymore. It doesn't brake dive excessively. It's just overall tightened it up to feel like a brand new vehicle again. Probably obviously better than new for that vehicle. I actually find myself hitting bumps on purpose just to feel how smooth it is. The rougher it gets, the better the suspension feels, honestly. Off-road, I haven't really done much, just kind of some grassy fields, kind of not really trail riding, just kind of around the house and property we've got down the street. So I could only imagine that it's going to perform night and day better than the factory suspension off-road as well. One nitpick I do have with it, not really a nitpick, just something to point out, I guess. When I originally bought the truck, I put 2-inch leveling spacers you saw in the video. As they said, it's 1.85 inches, so I did lose a little bit of that. Personally, I like a little bit of rake. I want to say it would probably be perfectly level if I didn't have those spacers you see in the video in the rear. I added those to add that rake back, the natural pickup truck higher in the rear unloaded rake, because of the 2-inch leveling spacers out front. So if you were to do the 6112s and leave the stock alone, I feel like it'd be perfect. Or, you know, you've got those 4 settings, so you could even drop it down one in the front. Or if you want it to sit exactly like mine, which I am definitely a fan of, those spacers in the rear, because like I may have mentioned before, I do use it as a truck. I do tow fairly often with it. Nothing too crazy heavy, but it is nice to still have it nice and level when you're towing. So again, they don't list those parts for the Suburban, but a Suburban and a Tahoe use the same part number, OEM, and every other aftermarket part I've seen. So as you can see with mine, it bolts right up, no reason not to. So if you're looking for a big improvement over stock, but you don't want to go completely wild with a Fox shock or King Coilover setup, this might be a good option for you. Check out Bilstein. I don't really have a plug for where to get them. Shock Surplus is where I got them from. Paid full retail just like anybody else. If you've got a local shop, obviously that's the way to go. Support small business whenever you can. And if you don't mind, support me. Hit that subscribe button, comment, like, share, and thanks for watching.